My dear friends, I must tell you something rather surprising about joy. You see, for many years, I considered myself quite an expert on happiness, or rather, what I thought was happiness. As an atheist and academic at Oxford, I had constructed an entire philosophy around the pursuit of pleasure. How amusing it seems now, rather like a blind man writing treatises on the nature of colour. But let me tell you about what I call the surprising discovery of joy. And mind you, I use that capital J quite deliberately. You see, what I discovered was not at all what I had been seeking, rather like a man who, searching for a simple match to light his pipe, accidentally stumbles upon the secret of fire itself. What I'm about to share with you may sound utterly shocking to modern ears. Indeed, it shocked me so thoroughly that it led to my most unexpected conversion. The truth about joy, you see, is that it's not at all what we imagine it to be. It's not happiness, though they're often confused. It's not pleasure, though that's what I long mistook it for. It's something far more profound, and dare I say, far more dangerous. You see, I discovered something rather peculiar about joy. It has a way of ambushing you when you least expect it. Take my own experience with Norse mythology in my younger days. There I was, reading about Balder the Beautiful, when suddenly I was struck by what I can only describe as an inconsolable longing. Not for the story itself, mind you, but for something the story pointed to, something just out of reach. Now here's where it becomes rather interesting. Most of us spend our lives chasing what we believe will bring us joy, success, relationships, achievements, rather like a child running after soap bubbles, only to find them bursting at our touch. But true joy, capital J joy, operates quite differently. Consider this. Have you ever noticed how our most joyful moments often come not when we're pursuing happiness, but when we're pursuing something else entirely? It's rather like trying to look at a distant star. Look directly at it, and it seems to fade. Look slightly to the side, and suddenly it becomes brilliantly clear. I remember distinctly the moment this truth began to dawn on me. I had been reading George MacDonald's Fantasts in my room at Oxford. Nothing particularly extraordinary about that evening, mind you. But suddenly I felt what I can only describe as a baptism of my imagination. Joy broke through, not as a feeling but as a signpost pointing to something far more significant. But here's the shocking truth that most people miss entirely. Joy isn't merely a feeling to be pursued, it's a pointer to something beyond itself. Rather like hunger doesn't exist for itself but points to the reality of food, joy points to something, or rather, someone, who exists beyond our immediate experience. Now, here's where it becomes rather revolutionary, and I must ask you to follow me carefully here. Most of us approach joy as if it were a destination, rather like planning a holiday to Brighton. But what if I told you that joy is more like a lighthouse beam, not meant to be captured but to guide us home? You see, in my academic pride, I had assumed that joy was something to be analysed, categorised and filed away in neat philosophical drawers. How utterly wrong I was. It would be rather like trying to dissect a sunbeam. The very act of analysis destroys the thing you're trying to understand. Let me share something I've never quite put this way before. Imagine, if you will, a man living in a world of black and white who suddenly catches a glimpse of colour. He can't explain it, can't contain it, and the moment he tries to grasp it, it seems to slip away. Yet that glimpse changes everything. It tells him there's more to reality than he had imagined. That, my friends, is precisely what joy does. Here's the shocking part, and I do mean shocking, for it certainly shocked me. Joy is not merely a pleasant emotion, it's a divine summons. Think of it as a telegram from God, if you will. The remarkable thing isn't just the message itself, but the fact that we have the capacity to receive it at all. Consider how this changes everything. Those unexpected moments of longing when you're watching a sunset, listening to a piece of music, or even reading a children's story. They're not merely emotional accidents. They're signposts pointing to something far more real than our so-called real world. Now here's what I discovered after years of fighting against this truth. And I must tell you, I fought rather stubbornly, like a man arguing against the sunrise while standing in its light. Joy isn't merely spiritual, it's terribly physical too. It catches you in the pit of your stomach, creates an ache in your heart that no earthly pleasure can satisfy. I remember standing in my room at Magdalen College, looking out at the gargoyles against the Oxford sky. In that moment, I realized something that changed everything. All these years, I hadn't been searching for joy at all. Joy had been searching for me. Think of it this way, and this is crucial. Have you ever noticed how the most profound moments of joy leave you feeling both utterly satisfied and desperately hungry at the same time? It's rather like being homesick for a place you've never visited. That, my dear friends, is no accident. Here's the shocking truth that finally brought this hardened atheist to his knees. Joy is God's homing beacon. Every moment of inexplicable longing, every haunting note of music that brings tears to your eyes, every sunset that makes your heart ache, these are not cruel cosmic jokes. They are divine breadcrumbs, leading us home. My dear friends, let me tell you something that still astonishes me to this day. The very joy I spent years running from, analyzing and attempting to dissect, turned out to be God's megaphone to my deaf ears. Rather like a man who discovers that the mysterious letter he's been afraid to open contains news of an inheritance beyond imagining. Now, you might ask, and it's a perfectly sensible question, what are we to do with this understanding? Well, I suggest something rather counterintuitive. Instead of chasing joy, learn to recognize it as a divine appetizer. When it comes, in a piece of music, a moment of friendship, or even in a child's laughter, don't try to grasp it. Rather, let it point you to its source. Let us pray then, not as those seeking mere happiness, but as children recognizing their Father's voice. Most gracious Lord, who has planted within us this mysterious seed of longing, we thank you not just for joy itself, but for what it reveals. Help us to understand that our very capacity for joy is evidence of our divine design. When we feel that sweet ache, that inconsolable longing, let us remember that we were made for another world. Grant us the wisdom to see that our dissatisfaction with mere earthly pleasures isn't a flaw in our design, but proof of our heavenly heritage. Like a bird that feels an inexplicable urge to fly south, may we recognize these moments of joy as navigation points guiding us home. Before we part, I challenge you to do something rather daring. The next time you experience that peculiar stab of joy, and you will, for God is rather persistent in his courtship of our souls, don't try to analyze it. Don't attempt to capture or preserve it. Instead, follow where it leads. For I can promise you this, it always leads to him. Remember, dear friends, that joy is not the end of the journey. It is God's invitation to begin it. And though the path may seem unclear and the destination at times uncertain, know this: the very longing you feel is proof that you were made for something more, something eternal, something that awaits you beyond the shadowlands of this world. May God grant you the courage to follow where joy leads, for I assure you, having made this journey myself, what awaits you is far greater than anything you could dare to imagine. Until we meet again, whether in this world or the next, may you know not just happiness, but joy, true joy, that divine discontent that leads us all homeward.